Dark Slab Audio on music production and audio engineering. Welcome to Dark Slab Audio and our Insights series. I do believe this is the 24th video in our Insights series. And in this video, we want to talk about don't take the life of your production with over-editing and over-processing. This is a very complicated issue, but after talking about the last couple videos that we were talking about, frequency modulations, volume modulations, the real magic of tools like RX and Melodyne, that this is a problem. So we always come back to the same thing that I always really try to tell you: get as good of performances as you can and as good of capture as you can. But once you've gotten there, the over-processing and the over-editing is a problem. So, when you hear people talk about issues with mouth clicks and breaths and on and on and on and on and on, a whole lot of things you don't want to completely destroy because you're sucking the life out of the project. And little things with volume modulations, frequency modulations, and things that are happening that, make it sound more live and real and not so synthetic. Like you hear people will play with MIDI and they go, it just sounds too robotic, like something sucked all the life out of it. There's a fine line between over-editing and processing and not editing and processing enough to save issues. But we've talked about that a lot, that the power is in the performance, and then you can do magic with a really good performance and a really good capture. But over-editing and over-processing, you can just make a mess and suck all the life out of your project, whether or not you're in the DAW, or whether or not you're in something like RX or in something like Melodyne, that whenever you're dealing with any aspect of the production on a track or the production on a whole, you have to really be careful of this. Because I'll get people that, like, let's say we're dealing with frequency modulations, in Melodyne, and they start trying to mess with all this stuff to the point to where it just becomes unnatural sounding, that they're sucking the life out of it, and if you get in something like RX, that they start, really, trying to get breath control, declick, declick and declip are a little different, but things like DS, deplosives and, mouth click and all these things that they just start over-processing, over-editing the heck out of otherwise great performance in a pretty good production. That different musicians have different inflections and articulations that they use differently, that is part of their trademark or part of the way they do it. And you might want to lessen a little bit, maybe tamp things down a little bit if it's just too much, too much, plosive, or too much mouth click, sometimes it can get ridiculous, and you should have a pretty good idea by listening to some pretty good productions to have an understanding of that and not over process and over edit things to death, because it is a problem with all the tools we have nowadays. Like I told you before in the last video, the real power of tools like Melodyne and RX are doing light work, making things that are pretty dang good top notch. Does that make sense? But not over processing it to death and sucking all the life out of it, going after every little detail and trying to make it robotic to the point to where you're not letting them be the performers they are and the artists they are, and unless they're real adamant going, I got this habit of going all the time, and I need you to do something about that because I'm like a crazy dog, bro, and I don't know what else to do, and it's like, if they don't ask for it, don't think that it's something you need to do all the time, because there's so many times that when I first got into doing engineering, and I really got a pretty good understanding of all the tools, that I would overprocess to death and suck the life out of things, because I'd be like, I could fix everything almost, and I'd spend ridiculous amounts of time overprocessing, over editing things to where I didn't use it properly, or it would be like, well, I know maybe I can tamp that down a little bit, it's a little bit exaggerated there or something, but I would just go after everything until it just got, by the time I got done, I would listen to the original files and go, I've sucked all the life out of that track. The guitarist may not have sounded, he's a little bit rough, but for what they're doing and their artistic thing, by the time I got done, it was worse than the original file, because I had just sucked all the life out of it and robotized it to the point with auto-tune and all this stuff that, it just got to the point there was no life in it. Instead of, dealing with something, if it's a little bit too exaggerated, and dealing with issues, or serious problems, and cleaning things up really well, light editing, light processing on great performances can make them top notch. Does that make sense? And not going after when you go, no, if it's that bad, let's re-record it. Let's talk to the guitarist and the vocalist and go, you got this issue going on. Do you really want it like that, or you want to redo that? You want to work on that a little bit, and try not to stomp on their ego or anything, but, not putting yourself in a position to where you're spending way too much time in editing and processing. You're over processing and over editing. You're sucking the life out of the tracks and the captures that you do have, and sometimes you get audio anomalies. You get other things like robotizing it, and to where it's really unnatural sounding, to where you've really just overdone it. Like we talk about volume and frequency modulations in that one video, that's a huge area you have to be real careful of. Like right here, it might be a little bit of a problem, and they went along and dipped down and up, and maybe not so drastic. Maybe I don't want to knock that all the way out, because it's kind of an inflection in the way they sing, and I want to tap that down a bit. But I want to ask them, if it's not real obvious. You get some performers, it's real obvious that they have some type of way they do things, and you don't really want to mess with, and you don't want to overprocess nor edit trying to fix them when that is just the way they sing, even though it might not be how you feel that they would be a top-notch performer. You can talk to them about it. You want, just be careful you don't stomp on egos, but you don't want to sit there and try to repair a bunch of stuff that to them isn't to repair, and overprocessing, editing, sucking the life out of things. So I kind of want to make a video about that, because I've had so many times where I get in my DAW, especially when I was first learning and really getting good at editing things and processing things, that I would over edit and over process the crap out of things, to where by the time I got done, I'd go back and I'd go find that file and I'd listen to the original file with the new file and be like, damn, I butchered that. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, sometimes it actually sounded a little bit cleaner, but I mean, sometimes it was like I was sucking the life out of all these little teeny things that sometimes they say are a problem. Really aren't that much of a problem. They're just part of life, bro. And in some people it's more exaggerated than in others, but it's part of the way they do things, or the way they sing, or the way they play, or the way they, and you can address the issue as an engineer before you start butchering their stuff if you think it's a serious issue, but you need to state that, and then, if you really want to spend the time, do a version where you do light editing and light processing, and you don't butcher the heck out of it. And if you really feel you want to, butcher the heck out of it and make a different version that you can give to them and go, well, in this version I kept it pretty much alive, bro. In this version I butchered the heck out of it, and sucked all the life out of it to where it sounds, real kind of, and you know what I'm saying? Sometimes you can ask, some people do, they want hyper clean stuff they really want you to go in there and just butcher the heck out of it and take out all imperfections and everything, and that's the way they like it. but also some do not, and it's going to have a different type of effect on the production. Does that make sense? Let's look at like the difference between old analog recordings and some newer stuff that people are just like, I like that old analog sound. It's a little saturated, a little distortion, warm. Performances and captures can be the same way, that they've got more life with that stuff in it, and you're sucking it out of it. And they're looking for a plug-in to put the life back in their production. Like, maybe you can put it on vinyl or something, bro. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it can be true sometimes. So be very careful of that, and taking into consideration, think about it, and address your productions that way, and address the people you're working with that way, and make it something that is very much something that is a part of you dealing with and understanding and taking into consideration whenever you're going into productions, so that you don't make that same mistake that I did. There's times where I do go after things, I basically suck the life out of it, and it's a really hyper clean production. Sometimes not so much, bro. Because it just doesn't sound right, or I'm really going after that, the way that guy plays his guitar or bass or sings, and I'm not doing them justice, but I'm just leaving them alone. Go, well, I know, she goes, and she got that little breath thing, but it's part of her thing, and it's like, if she wants it gone, that's cool, but I don't assume that, does that make sense? Because, well, a lot of times if you're not just doing really hyper clean pop stuff, dance stuff, or, some EDM stuff, or, any type of genre that they're just really shooting for hyper clean, that you don't want to do that, because they want to sound a little more natural and analog and old school and, more alive, and what they really are, not, some, robot-sized version of who they are. Does that make sense? And you really need to take that in consideration. Plus, you can make it sound more robot-sized and not natural when you overdo it, unless you're really good at it, tamping things down, and controlling things and things like that. That it's an art form also, going there and doing that. So you really need to take that consideration anytime you are doing editing and processing, that it is really an art form in controlling some of these issues that come up, rather than eradicating them and get out your Death Star. You know what I'm saying? It's like, death to all of that. And you're trying to control it a little bit, but it ain't exactly gone that way. It doesn't suck the life out of it. So I certainly hope you enjoyed this next video on our Inside series. Peace, hope, love. I'll see you in the next video.